I call to order the Assembly Finance Committee of July 6th. Ms. Spiegel, will you please note our roll?
Thank you, Chair Treem. All Assembly members are present in chambers besides Assembly Member Wafal Gadak, who is present via Zoom, and Assembly members Gladaszewski, Hughes Scandies, and Smith are absent.
Thank you. Approval of minutes. Any additions or corrections to the minutes from the June 1st meeting? Seeing none, those minutes are adopted, and we will jump right into our agenda topics, and they are all on housing tonight. This is a special housing focused meeting. My intention with this meeting is to introduce these concepts. I don't think we need to make a lot of decisions tonight. We'll just ask questions, get information, maybe decide what additional information we might need in the future to get to the point where we will make decisions. But I think tonight should be pretty easy. Thank you all for being here so we can have this meeting, even though some of us don't want to be here, but it will be productive, I promise. So we will start with agenda topic A, housing tax abatement. Should this be Mr. Rogers or Mr. Chambor?
Thank you, Chair Treem. I think we can pass it along to Mr. Chambor.
Sure, thank you. So, Madam Chair, I'd like to point the committee to their packet, page 8. There's a memo from me in it, and the first paragraph, which has 3 sentences, really condenses the entire housing action plan into the briefest synopsis that I've seen yet. And so just to let you know what that is, it's in high cost housing markets where you have steady or declining populations. One of the key solutions is to increase the housing supply. The city and borough of Juneau as an organization, the primary tools that you have are funding, use of CBJ property, tax abatement, and regulation, primarily through the land use code. And so far, since 2017, the Assembly has started to put into place all of these components pretty aggressively. However, if the results within the housing market in your community are not seen, you really have to think about being more aggressive with those tools. And so that leads to the tax abatement concept. It has been a number of Assembly members have talked about how to broaden the current tax abatement programs that are in place. We have a subdivision tax abatement program that has been utilized probably 2 or 3 developers a year for the last 3 years. We have a downtown tax abatement program that was started last May. Nobody has used that though, but there have been lots of inquiries. And there's also been a senior assisted living tax abatement program for assisted living projects over 15 in the borough, city and borough. So we know that will be enacted once the Vintage Park Torrey Pines Development Assisted Living Project will be done. And so you have an idea or an option to extend the tax abatement to address affordable and workforce housing shortages. And so the concept is to amend the current tax abatement ordinance to include eligibility of housing development over 4 units within the entire urban service area. This supports infill development on land, access to water and sewer. And then also, if broadening that concept to larger housing options, consider adding some eligibility requirements that the projects must beat 75% or more of density so that the land use is being utilized properly on that project. So one other concept in the housing action plan is addresses land scarcity, and that you have to be very economical with the use of available land. And so that provision would address that. And then finally staff does have concern about foregoing tax revenue in face of inflation, but potentially you could add a sunset date for 10 years to encourage housing development in the short term. So that's a concept to add to the tax abatement ordinance if you so wish.
Thank you, Mr. Chambor. Any questions? Mayor Walden.
I'll probably slaughter this, but we passed an ordinance that allows people now to condominiumize land. So like the project out across from Egan Drive from Super Bear, would that qualify for this?
So through the chair, I'm not familiar with that project.
A similar one would be on Jennifer Drive, where we're letting the school district do those houses. That the land is owned by the association, but everybody owns their own house.
Oh yeah, so that is okay.
So does that,
pardon me,
qualify for this?
I believe so. So the provision would be any development, that creates more than 4 units, very similar to the downtown tax abatement. So private, nonprofit, if they're paying taxes, I don't know if that is the case in all cases, but that would apply if they create more than 4 units.
Okay, Ms. Hale and then Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Trombor. You mentioned staff has a concern about foregoing tax revenues, but I think the point has been made that if something's not built yet, we're not getting tax revenues from those buildings anyway. So is that correct? So we would be foregoing it anyway.
Yes, that is correct.
Mr. Watt.
Manager.
That's correct. And just a little bit of observation as we work through some of these issues. So let's just talk about something a little bit different. So a long time ago, we took a fee in lieu of parking downtown. The idea was incentivize development by making it so people didn't have to provide as much parking and would pay a fee. At the time, there was a concern that too many people would use the program and there would be too much parking demand on the street and our parking structures. And I remember at the time advocating for a fee in lieu of 0, but people were worried. And so we did the fee in lieu amount, and over time, hardly anybody used fee in lieu of parking, and eventually it came back to the assembly, and recently you dramatically reduced the amount of parking available, again, to try and incentivize housing. So with regard to tax abatement, I think we're kind of in that same situation where it's unlikely that we are going to get a market response that's going to be overwhelming. I think that's very unlikely, right? So we dipped our toe in tax abatement on senior housing, and we got one project, and we haven't had a stampede of senior housing projects. And then we immersed ourselves up to the calf, and we said, okay, let's do tax abatement. I think the chair likes the swimming pool metaphor most of all. We do tax abatement downtown. We haven't had a stampede of housing projects downtown. So I think the idea here is, as we go borough wide, get out of the kiddie pool. What we're really trying to do is nudge projects that are on the edges of reality into reality. And the concept here is, if we're uncomfortable, maybe you embed a sunset date, and maybe you say, we're going to do this for a period of time, and maybe that motivates people. And maybe that gives the assembly a little bit of security and feeling that, there's a little bit of hedge against too much development, which seems a little bit hard to believe might happen.
Thank you, Mr. Watt. Mr. Bryson, and then Walal Gadak.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So Mr. Chambor, I'm going to try and phrase this into a good question here. As developers are letting you know, like the issues they're running into, why they're not developing, or what is preventing them from developing housing, because we're just talking about housing. We need housing right now. Of the 4 things that you listed here, what are you hearing the most of that is preventing developers? Because I'm not hearing that funding is an issue. Developers have funding. They've got land that they're trying to build on, so they don't need CBJ land, and they're trying to build stuff regardless of tax abatement. Sorry to lead you into the answer to the question, but what are developers telling you that is the problem of why they're not able to develop in Juneau. Because we've been asking as an assembly the entire time I've been on the assembly, and I'm pretty sure assemblies before that were asking for relief in the housing crisis. So what is it the developers are telling you as the housing manager for CBJ that is preventing them from building housing? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So through the chair, yes, definitely a broad question. I think the answer is all of the above. It's a project case by case basis. You have a wide range of developers looking to do projects. Some are mom and pop kind of developers, some are medium term developers, some are long term established developers in the community. And across the board, you'll have a different opinion on what the exact problem is. However, in the last number of months that I've been the planning manager, and I have more interface with developers through the pre-application process and through the day-to-day workings of CDD, inevitably when developers come in to talk about their projects, they always follow or end with, and what sort of CBJ incentives are there to help me with this project? And so in the terms of affordable workforce housing incentives borough-wide, we currently don't have anything for those type of projects. So if they're an assisted living developer, I have something to offer them. If they're a private developer looking to subdivide lots, we have an incentive there. So they're looking for any sort of help to get the costs down, increase the chance to get through the permitting process quickly, and put projects in the ground.
Will Algaduck.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chambor, I'm wondering, as I'm new in this space of tax abatement, if we have some data that gives us an indication of how much was actually used for affordable housing versus high income housing, how much tax was actually forfeit as a result of this abatement, wondering what that cost to the city and borough was. And as we're talking about 4 units and larger, are we talking about still affordable housing, or are we talking about luxury condos? Is there a distinction between how we dictate who gets to access this tax abatement?
Sure, thank you. So through the chair, so 2 questions there. So the first one, when we presented to the COW on June 6th on STRs and the Housing Action Plan memo update, there was a table in there talking about the amount of incentives for the current tax abatement programs. And so just for example, on subdivision tax abatement program in 2021, Chilkat Vistas had $16,000 abated for a $1.5 million assessed value parcel. And the Ocean View subdivision had $1,000 taxes abated for a $101,000 assessed value subdivision. So in that, we have some definite data on that as on those specific programs. And that will continue and be ongoing. Again, with all, you're going to have to remind me what your second question is.
Yeah, for the 4 units or over, as we're considering, like, is it affordable housing that we'd be considering, or any type of,
Sure.
of 4 unit or more development?
Yes, and so it is broad. It is the idea that affordable and workforce housing is a mixture. It's similar to the terms in the Affordable Housing Fund. Typically, affordable housing projects are 0 to 80% AMI, primarily done by the Housing Authority and nonprofits. And then there's the fair market multifamilies in the workforce space, 0 or 80 to 120% AMI target. So that tax abatement idea as written in the memo would be pretty broad and cover all of the projects developed over 4.
Mayor Weldon, did you have a question or a motion? Okay, Mayor Weldon and then Ms. Hale.
Remind me, for the tax abatement, are we still requiring them to pay the 2.65 educational piece, or actually Mr. Watt is shaking his head yes, so I'm assuming that's the answer.
Can you shake your head a little louder for the record?
For the record, I think the idea here is that we would expand the eligibility in the existing ordinance, which abates property tax, not including the mandatory minimum school contribution of 2.65 mils. Thank
you, Mr. Watt. Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate Wahala Gaduk's question about affordable housing versus, luxury condos. But I also think that part of what we've learned, when we look at Housing Action Plan and some of the research that's been done, is that as people free up housing, then their house, if let's say they move into a condo, then the house that they've lived in for the last 30 years becomes available on the market. So I think where we're at right now is we just really need housing. We really need affordable housing, but overall we need more housing. And I would advocate not being too restrictive.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to get it out there because if we're going to have a discussion about housing, I'm afraid if we don't really say the problem that is affecting the developers in the community, then we're not really moving anything on the housing. First to Wahagaduk's concern about the luxury condos, the ones I think of are the cannery ones that overlook Hawk Bay. Those were supposed to be $200,000 less when they first started out, when they were first marketing them. And what ended up happening is it became incredibly difficult to build on that hillside right on the coast. And it made it into well over $500,000 condos, but they were trying to keep them. So sometimes when they're building, costs just go up. I got to go to the regulation here and
Mr. Bryson, can I?
Yes, Madam Chair. What's the best way for me to proceed?
I think you have a point, and it is something we should talk about. But since this is a Finance Committee meeting, I would suggest you bring it up in one of Ms. Gladaszewski's meetings. Because I'm trying to keep us focused on the financial aspects.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. And I'm trying to connect it back to financial.
Okay.
But if we talk about all the financial moves that we can make, and we talk about all the actions that we as an assembly can make, but we have a department in the city that is literally preventing development, and we have the developers in the community that are up in arms that they're having a difficult time dealing with CDD. If we don't address those issues, if we don't address what's bugging the developers and what's getting developers who have developed in our community for decades are stopping, they're no longer building homes in our community. When we told no to a major developer, he then went and bought property in another town. I mean, that's what CDD is doing right now. They're driving out experienced developers. So we can talk about housing all day long, and I would love to talk about, connect the finances to it. But if we don't talk about the real issue that CDD is broken in terms of getting regular housing built and developing it, there's not a developer in the community that isn't furious right now, to the point that people are either developing in other cities or they're not developing in our community anymore. It's the biggest problem that's affecting housing. So we can talk about it all day long, but if we don't fix that main broken thing, we're never going to fix housing here. Thank you for the time, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. I have a question after Mr. Watt.
Thank you, Chair. So per your comment, we should stick to financial issues. And I just have to say, CDD has the very difficult task of enforcing the code that the Assembly adopts. And so if the Assembly wants to adopt different code, we should work on that. And I would call everybody's attention to the Housing and Development Task Force that met in the winter and the spring, and the recommendations that they made. So there's a number of projects for code amendments, and per our code, they all have to go through the Planning Commission, and there's priority on them all. And we were trying to schedule a joint meeting of the Assembly and the Planning Commission so that you can look at that work plan and make sure that you're happy with the code amendments that staff and the commission are working on.
Thank you, Mr. Watt. My question on tax abatement, actually I have two questions for you, Mr. Chambor. And this first question, I think you're the one who has told me this. So if you could just repeat that info for the assembly, is about how tax abatement helps in the financing structure of developments. And then my second question is, if in any of your discussions with developers when they've inquired about it, have you heard any feedback about potential changes that we could make to the structure of the tax abatement, or just does anybody have anything to say about that?
Sure. So Madam Chair, yes. So on the first question, in terms of the development process, tax abatement's obviously an incentive that provides relief to the developer at the back end. It's once the project is complete. It does not help with the upfront capital that a lot of or the equity needed to start projects, especially larger ones that a lot of developers have difficulty putting together. However, it is a nudge for sure for folks who are thinking it, to know that they have this relief at the back end. And then also it helps on the front end a bit in terms of negotiating with either lenders for construction loans, or granting agencies to say, hey, we are also having this as part of our project portfolio. Therefore, they can get better terms and have more legitimacy as they have those sort of negotiations that we don't have concrete data on, but we do know that happens. So we've been told that a number of times, that yes, if you put in downtown tax abatement, that helps me negotiate financing terms. And we also know that the Torrey Pines development project talked about how that helped them really put a package together to make that project work. And then your second question.
Have you heard any feedback about the structure of what we have in place for downtown when developers have inquired, or has anybody said anything, or this seems okay?
Yeah, so on the downtown tax abatement, I've just gotten general inquiries about 4 or 5 projects. And then we've included that as a question for projects in the area that are coming through CDD, as well as the Affordable Housing Fund. Are you going to participate in the downtown tax abatement? If it a lot of folks say yes, but there just hasn't been any projects developed yet to use it.
Thank you. Any further questions, Mayor Weldon?
Thank you. I would move that we have staff draft an ordinance to extend the current tax abatement ordinance to include eligibility of housing developments over 4 units within the entire urban service area. The projects must meet at least 75% of eligible density, and a sunset date of 10 years plus everything else we put in Torrey Pines. And have it come back to the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Hale.
I just object for purposes of the question. When we say a sunset date of 10 years, are we saying that we will do this for 10 years? And at year 10, if we give the tax abatement, they still get that tax abatement for the period of time that they'll get it? Thank you.
And I'm not saying that we can't extend the sunset date, but yes, that is your question is correct. Yes, it's just to extend our allowing the tax abatement for 10 years. If they get it on year 9 before it expires, then they get whatever. I think it's 10 or 12 years. I can't.
It's 12 years. Okay.
12 years.
Okay. Seeing no objection to that motion has passed, and that was item A. Which brings us to item B, which is Affordable Housing Fund update. Mr. Chambor.
Sure thing. Oops, good.
Mayor Weldon.
We didn't go through the rest of the memo. Did you want to do that?
I think that is what we're.
Okay, that's all we were looking for. Okay, never mind.
We have a very efficient memo. Yeah. Mr. Chambor.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So you actually have a separate memo on the housing fund, page 10 in your packet. Kind of shows where we are to date. It includes some details on the current amount of funding in the housing fund, $6.1 million fund balance at the end of FY22. primarily because of the inclusion of the 5 million in general funds that were recently added. The fund will receive a 1% sales tax deposit of 400,000 in FY23. And then also the Assembly chose to add 4.15 million in the 1% sales tax list so that there's money in the fund going forward. Other information on that summary page is the projects that were awarded last year. You have Aware, Glory Hall, St. Vincent's Channelview, and St. Vincent's Teal Street for a total of $650,000 awarded from the fund. There's one outstanding preliminary loan request through Gastineau Lodges that came in through that competition, and that is another topic for later in the meeting. The review committee looked through the program as they went through the process for the first time, included some suggested changes, which I also believe are good changes as the administrator of the program. Primarily, one was add a letter of interest step. So after this meeting concludes this week sometime, getting a letter out for interest for projects that may be wanting to use the fund this year. Shorten and tighten up the application. It was a little weedy to get through the first time around. One of the things that kind of caught the review committee up was the idea of rehabilitation loans, because it is an eligible activity and is something that's important for affordable housing projects in particular. But they really suggested limiting those to 10% of the overall funds allowed, primarily because the overall goal is to get capital out there to produce units. So they said, a good opportunity, but let's really get new units on the ground, and then just include a one-page pro forma funding template so that all the funding details are on one page, because in the first round of application it was a little scattered.
Thank you, Mr. Chambor. Any questions on this topic? And then maybe we'll go back to the other part of the memo that's relevant to the housing fund. Mr. Bryce.
I'll ask my how is CDD broken question a different way. So we've approved $350,000 for Glory Hall to turn it into from 5 one-bedroom apartments into 7 one-bedroom apartments, and over 8 months, and they still don't have a permit. It's gone back and forth. So, I mean, could you maybe give us a brief explanation on why the Glory Hall's permit was denied to add the 2 extra one-bedroom apartments? Maybe we could have some understanding on that.
Sure.
Mr. Watts.
So Chair, I don't think that's a financial topic for the Finance Committee. Broadly, that CDD made the difficult decision of reading the code and stating what they thought the code meant. That decision has been appealed. It's before the Planning Commission. I believe, I haven't seen the order, but I think the Planning Commission either has very recently or very soon will put out their decision on that topic. But it's not a financial topic. It's a CDD has to read the code and interpret the code the way they see it.
Thank you, Mr. Watt. Ms. Hale.
It's very simple. What is an SRO?
Single room occupancy.
Like a efficiency apartment?
Yep.
Thank you.
Mayor Weldon.
Thank you. It's kind of similar to Ms. Hale's question. Limit eligible requests for rehabilitation projects to 10%. Could you kind of explain what you mean by that?
Sure. So, for example, in this year, round 1, St. Vincent de Paul had 2 applications. One was for rehabilitation of kind of emergency fire instruments on their Channelview apartment project, and then some rehab stuff to get a couple of units in working order at their Teal Street project. And so those are rehabilitation of existing what are affordable housing units, which is, again, an eligible activity and a good one. But the committee really felt strongly that reserving the nexus of the funds for capital to build new projects is important.
Follow up.
The reason I'm asking is anything downtown for the most part, unless it's a new project, would be rehabilitating units. So we're not looking at doing anything there.
Sure. So through the chair, obviously the housing action plan has 64 different strategies. One of the other strategies was to create a specific a health and safety rehab type loan program specifically for downtown. It's been conceptualized and kind of discussed at committee levels from time to time, but has never come to fruition.
So basically more to follow on that. This is a little bit different. Okay. Got
Yep.
it. Thank you.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the suggestion is to put 1.5 million in this next year's kind of call for proposals. I see how much was approved in 2022. Can you remind me, was that the full amount that was advertised, or what amount was advertised in 2022?
Sure. So through the chair. So in 2022, 650,000, I believe, was set aside for a competitive round. However, we did get more funding requests, and obviously the Assembly through the process decided to award more for that, and also to consider, an additional preliminary loan for the Gastineau apartment lodges that's still in process. And so just in general, I'd say that the way affordable housing funds kind of work is that, you put a bunch of money in the fund, and you really want it to be there for multiple years at a time, so that as people think about projects and development, because they're really difficult, especially on the affordable housing side, to know that there's going to be a pot of money that they can apply for 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. Last year, at this time, you only had about 1.1 million or 1.2 million to work with. And so the Assembly's decision was like, just put out a little bit of it so that you can have another round the next year. Now with you've already done the heavy work by putting more money in the fund. So now you can kind of just let it go. And if you get $5 million of fantastic projects this year, why would you not spend it? So you don't necessarily have to put out, this amount of money is available because you have so much in the fund right now. So that 1.5 million was just to go along with what was requested last year prior to knowing the additional funds that are going into the fund that has happened in the last few weeks. So just to follow up, my thought process now is that if you do the letter of interest, we send that out, we'll have a definite gauge by the end of the month or early August who's working on projects that are going to be wanting to use the fund as kind of a preliminary step to knowing how to potentially use this going forward.
Mayor Weldon.
Okay, this is just because I can't remember. Where are we with the tightening up the accessory apartments that they can't be used for short term? Have we already fixed that, or is that in the process of being fixed?
Mr. Watts. Mr. Palmer?
It's in the process. Okay. So there was a request out of the committee of the whole, and I think that's queued up somewhere in our meeting schedule. Mr. Palmer was working on that.
Okay. Mayor Weldon.
Okay, I will attempt.
Wait, can I ask a question first?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. My question on this part, what was my question? I don't remember, but I will ask, is the team of people who's going to evaluate the applications the same?
Sure. So, Madam Chair, again, I took a poll of the committee, I guess in April, to get their final suggestions on how the first round had gone, and had indicated, they're more than willing to participate in year 2. I would hope they would want to, because the more you see these applications, the better you get at evaluating them. And so my hope is that they will, and I'll be recruiting them to do so. And then, the instruction from the Assembly was to make sure that there was a member of the development community and a member of the finance committee, and we had both of that. We also make sure to add a member of the systemic racism committee as well. So we'll make sure that all those bases are covered for evaluations going forward.
Awesome. Well, I think they did a great job on the first round, so please give them our thanks for coming back to do round 2. Mayor Weldon.
Thank you. And I'm not saying trying to work through this minute because I think it's all supported. I'm just trying to word it. So I will take any gentle encouragements along the way. So I would direct staff to advertise as available for round 2 competition in FY23. And I'll just throw out $1.5 million using the criteria addressed in the memo for round 2. Is that good for everybody?
Yep. Okay. Ms. Hale.
I guess I would offer an amendment, but perhaps a question to Mr. Chambor. In terms of the 1.5 million, Mr. Chambor has just been saying we may want to spend, you know, if we got $5 million worth of projects, we may want to fund $5 million worth of projects. So is that 1.5 million going to send the wrong message? And maybe that's a question for Mr. Chambor. What number would you recommend?
Sure, Madam Chair, and I think that's a great question. My thoughts are, you know, again, it was when we had very limited funds to advertise. You want to be realistic as to what projects might be funded in the next round, and then somebody can be, you know, strategic and be like, well, we're not far enough along, we'll go for the next round. But since you do have, I would kind of leave it open-ended and just say the next round of the assembly has this much amount in the fund balance, is looking for projects to address workforce and affordable housing needs. You know, who has projects, please apply, and then through the committee process, you'll get a recommendation.
Mayor Wellman.
That's actually why I put 1.5. There's no reason we couldn't expand it if we get a ton of big projects that we like. I'm just trying to keep it realistic to what's actual doable right now. We don't want someone to come forward right now that can't do anything for 5 years. That's what I'm looking at. And so we don't have to put it to 1.5. I'm just saying, let's throw out a number now. And if really good projects is, there's no reason later on we can't say, oh, those are all good projects, let's fund them all. But I also didn't want to spend the whole basket of eggs, so to speak.
Mr. Bryson.
Thank you. This is relevant to what you guys are discussing, is that 1.5 is a very reasonable number. And if they won't know that $2 million worth of requests came in or $3 million, no one will know that until they come in. And we could be the first people to say, hey, we want to up that number or not. So the 1.5 million sounds like an appropriate starting gate number. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Ms. Hale.
Thank you. And Mr. Chambor, I guess my only concern was that it might discourage people, but if you don't think it'll discourage people, I'm good with 1.5. And
I'll amend it to 2 million. How about that?
Oh, that's super. Thank you.
Okay, you've heard the mayor's motion. Is there any objection to that? No. Okay, that motion passes. Mr. Chambor, while we are still on affordable housing fund topic, maybe we could go back to the first memo. And so we just discussed the status of the fund and how it has been used and what we are going to do with kind of that similar program that we started last year. But there are potentially other things we could do with it. And I think that's kind of what you were getting at in the first memo. So maybe if you could go over that, and we'll see if there's questions.
Sure. Yeah, so Madam Chair, that is definitely correct. So, you know, with a big need, and again, looking at trends in development in terms of what is being permitted in the community, single family homes are being permitted, condos are doing okay, but your multifamily 1-2 bedroom workforce housing units are still not being developed. And so if the other incentives aren't getting it done, the other way to do that is through public-private partnerships. And so that last paragraph addresses, you know, how we use the sealed competitive bid process to attract an assisted living developer to put in a targeted need in the community. And these are some other projects that have bubbled up recently across departments. Obviously, Peterson Hill partnership with Clinton-Hyder Regional Housing Authorities for some remaining lots to allow for some affordable housing there. Second in Franklin, if you remember, was an RFP that went out about 5 years ago. And there were 2 projects that came forward, and we worked with Eagle Rock Ventures, who basically said at the end of the day, the cost and the financing was too difficult to get housing built there. And they suggested putting in tax abatement, parking reductions, and providing a grant opportunity. Well, we've, as a community, have done 2 of those 3 things. So perhaps, putting out another RFP with some funding from the housing fund for that location would work. Other items that have come forward, and I've lost my notes. Oh, it looks like, Renninger subdivision. Potential for another public-private partnership with the 2 remaining lots. Telephone Hill is going to be a topic in the future. And so understanding the process to try and find, dense multifamily housing or affordable housing in those locations will be good to learn and go through the process. And then 6th Street is Douglas as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chambor. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Mr. Chambor, sealed competitive bid, I've always recognized that as the best deal for the city because nobody knows what anybody else is paying. So the people that really want it have to really come up with as high a number as they can afford in order to acquire the property. It gets the city the highest dollar figure for the land available. But if we're trying to create affordable housing, that's the worst process because it makes the land cost the most. Could we look at maybe a lottery system and say that there's like 4 available, you can register to get one of these 4, and we're selling them purposely below cost with the caveat that you have to build the type of housing that we instruct you to build on that, and then we can dictate what the price would be. If we charge the most money for land, then that price is just simply passed on to the consumer, as Peterson Hill has very clearly proven that sealed competitive bid only makes things the most expensive, because if the land is expensive, you got to put an expensive house on it. You can't put a cheap house on an expensive piece of land.
Bryson.
So what are some other, sorry, Madam Chair, what are some other strategies available to the city that would that would get hands into the public, or get the land into the hands of the public at a less than high premium cost? What are other strategies to get land into the marketplace? That's right.
I think that this is a somewhat different situation, this sealed competitive bid as it's listed here. Maybe Mr. Chambor can explain.
Sure. Yes, I think so. Through the chair, I think, obviously the city's land disposal language outlines how to get land into public and private hands. So that is kind of a separate conversation as well. But the sealed competitive bid has been used multiple ways. Obviously, you talked about Peterson Hill, how it kind of went out for solicitation for private use. The way the sealed competitive bid was utilized for the assisted living was more like a request for proposals, where we were able to dictate exactly what we as the city wanted and provided the incentives up front that we predetermined what we were providing the developer. So we basically dictated the terms of engagement for the development of a needed housing project. And so you can utilize and create a sealed competitive bid packet for affordable and workforce housing, similar to what we did with assisted living. You just kind of build it in at the front. So that is a method, although I do know there is concerns about just, the Peterson Hill, the way things were disposed to individuals.
Thank you.
Watt.
Thank you, Chair. So following up on that, it might be the word bid that's a little bit misleading. So a sealed competitive process maybe is the best way to think about it. So what we did with the senior housing project is, if someone remembers, first we passed an ordinance to abate taxes for senior housing development. Then we bought the land, and then we put out a sealed process, and we said, we have this land, we've done tax abatement, we want a developer of senior housing, we want your proposals, and you can propose an incentive amount. And then we scored that based on best developer, best experience, best project for the community. And then we structured the sale of the land. It was still a market price sale, but we structured the payment schedule that made the finances work for that project. So something similar to that, I think, is appropriate. So when you see sealed competitive bid, don't assume that means, you know, highest payer is going to be awarded. That's not the idea. It's who's going to deliver the best project.
Mayor Weldon. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, I skipped Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Peterson Hill partnering with Clinton Heights Regional Housing Authority. I'm all over that partnership. I think that'd be a great partnership. My question, and I asked Mr. Rogers this earlier, is I'm a little concerned about property tax and how that would work, because I know Canada Day, for instance, they don't pay property tax until they get their deed to their house, which could be up to 30 years. So could you answer that, please?
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. Your question today, to me, triggered a little bit of digging on this subject. It's interesting. It's quite dated. So in the year 2000, the city enabled Clinton Heights Regional Housing Authority to develop up to 250 units across the borough. They happened to develop Canada Day. And there's a contractual relationship between Clinton Heights Regional Housing Authority and the occupants of those buildings, those houses, those parcels. The deeds for those parcels are held by Clinton Heights Regional Housing Authority. That's part of the contractual relationship. And what the city did in 2000 was negotiate a PILT, a payment in lieu of taxes. Clinton Heights Regional Housing Authority for that type of deal is not subject to property taxes. That's state law. That's not CBJ law. But they did agree on a negotiated PILT, which is 10% of their rent, effectively. We started to look today to see how 10% of their rent would compare to property taxes. I think we looked enough to realize that it's less than the property taxes would be on those parcels when they come into. Eventually, the deeds will be transferred to the owners and they will become fully taxable parcels. But until that happens, you're correct. We receive a PILT from Clinton Heights Regional Housing Authority in lieu of the property tax, and that PILT is lower than the property tax would otherwise be.
Thank you for looking into that.
Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's interesting. I've been reading about PILTs in other communities like Wrangell and wondering how they might be applicable here, but that's not what my question is. Can you talk a little bit about 6th Street Douglas? Thank you.
Sure. I can take it. Yeah. Yeah. So I think, you know, one of the things that I think it was the 2016 lands disposal plan, and it listed, you know, I believe 8 to 10 potential areas that the city could dispose of for housing in the future, and included Renninger, Peterson Hill, 2nd and Franklin. It's just another parcel that the city has that could be potentially used for housing. There's been no activity, you know, going towards that and no instruction to do so, but it has been identified in past plans.
Is it really steep? The land that's available?
Mr. Watt.
Through the chair, it is. So it's an unusual collection of pieces of land that the city owns. So when Douglas Town Site was subdivided, they platted 6th Street. It's not built, and there are lots up there. I don't know that the development style of Douglas fits there. I don't know that a parallel 6th Street to 5th Street really makes sense. But lots of land in the borough that we have is not really ideally situated for our historical development pattern. It is subdivided land that could be presumably sold or developed in probably a bunch of different ways. So we don't, you know, honestly, in terms of municipal land, we don't have super easy land. You know, all the good land really has been developed, or all the easy land has been developed. And it's the same thing that our private developers face. The land that they're trying to develop today is harder than the land that they developed in the 80s and 90s.
Thank you.
I blame Joe Juno for that. Mayor Weldon.
I'm just checking with staff to see if we need to do anything, or if you're just moving forward with the Peterson Hill and Clinton Heights Regional Housing Authority partnership, which is the first on your list, and we should just stay out of your way. I'm looking to see if I need to make a motion of any kind.
So through the chair, Madam Mayor, I don't believe so at this time. Our lands manager, Dan Blydorn, has been talking with Jackie Pata with Clinton Heights Regional Housing Authority for a while, and we'll continue talking.
Mr. Watt.
Thank you, Chair, but maybe for a non-finance committee topic, the Assembly's desire to solicit interest in any particular pieces of land, I think is a good topic for Lands, Housing, Economic Development Committee. So, you know, should we invite proposals for 2nd and Franklin? Should we invite proposals for 6th Street and Douglas? Should we, right? Those are the kinds of questions.
Yeah.
I think go to that committee.
Ms. Hale, are you willing to take that on?
Bring it on.
Yes, I love it. I have a follow-up question to the mayor's tax question. Presumably, if we do move forward with some kind of partnership with Clinton Heights Regional Housing Authority, we could structure that in a way that would satisfy our property tax desires. It wouldn't have to be the same as this other project.
Through the chair, I'm super interested in reading the historical document that Mr. Rogers found today that neither of us were aware of.
Okay.
I think we need to better understand what that means and whether that conveys continued development rights. So Mr. Rogers noted that gave them the opportunity to develop up to 250 units, which they haven't done. So I don't know if that endures or what. So I think we have some work to do on a new and interesting topic to us.
Fun, exciting. Ms. Hale.
22 years ago.
I do have a question, and I have no idea where in my memory this is dragging out from, but at some point we had a conversation about CBJ land. It's above the condos that couldn't sell because of the code. And at some point, we actually had a discussion about land and maybe we could put a road up behind them and develop that land.
Right
So-
across from Aurora Harbor up there.
Yeah, across from the yacht club.
Aurora Arms, there we go.
I think Greg Cheney talked about it when he was lands manager. Does this ring any kind of bells?
It rings a bell to me. Mr. Watt.
It does ring a bell. Thank you, Chair. I think what we can do, and I know Mr. Blydorn is listening, I think we can do an update for the Lands, Housing, Economic Development Committee about the municipal inventory and really which parcels to move forward trying to do things on.
That would be really exciting.
And I
Thank you.
think it's on if I can just grab the microphone a little longer. Whenever we're talking about municipal land, I think it's really important to talk about it in the context of all the municipal land, because if we advance one parcel forward and we say we think we should get proposals on this parcel, invariably we attract people near that parcel who maybe they like it undeveloped, and you kind of get we like the status quo. And I think we have to stay in the position of housing is a huge priority. We have some land. We've looked at all our land. These are the best pieces that we have, and we're looking at those best pieces. So otherwise we'll get, leave that one alone. I like that parking lot or whatever.
Thank you, Mr. Watt. I hope nobody likes parking lots that much. I have another question. I think that Mr. Watt really likes the Telephone Hill project. It shows up on lots of our lists. But what is the status of that? Like realistically, when would we be working on that?
Thank you, Chair. That Telephone Hill property is a fascinating topic that we could talk about for a long time. But I think what's going to happen is the bill got signed. DNR is going to convey the property to the city. We're going to be a landlord. It's going to be a new kind of situation. We owe the people that are living on the hill some communication about what our plan is, which we don't really have one. So I think the general message to them is we will go through this at deliberate municipal pace, and there'll be lots of opportunity for you to engage. I think there's going to be questions about when and how and when, we solicit for a developer or developers and whether we do any preliminary work. There's gonna be questions about parking. I think it's gonna trigger actually a lot of questions about parking. And on our 1% sales tax, we put the North State Office Building parking garage on our list. There's also a grant from the state coming for that. I think our goal is get rid of surface parking and concentrate in parking structures. And Telephone Hill, I think, is going to have that exact same thing. What kind of development are we looking for up there, and where are people going to park, and how are they going to access that? So I think we have we need to make a proposal to the Assembly about it's really bigger than Telephone Hill. It's a little bit of an urban planning task. It's a little bit about where parking is going to go and what's going to happen. So I think, I'm not sure which Assembly committee that'll come to, but that's a big project. That's going to be very interesting.
Thank you. Any other kind of questions on these project ideas? No. Okay. I assume we will hear more about them in the future. Are you ready for a break? I'm ready for a break. Let's take a 10-minute break. When Ms. Fiegel. Okay. Okay. You're not the chair. You don't get to decide that. Okay. Well, behave. I am gonna wait and see if we get, well, I'll get back on before we keep moving. Okay, she's back. Okay, we will go quickly but thoroughly through the rest of the agenda. And next up is item C, Gastineau Lodge's pre-development loan verbal update. Who is taking this one? Mr. Watt.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Sangston has been kind enough to come spend some time with us on a sunny evening. So last year when we did our fund solicitation, his group proposed for a pre-development loan for Gastineau Lodges. The committee recommended that loan could be supported if it was collateralized. He has provided some information. I was looking at it this afternoon. I'm not ready to make a recommendation on that. I would just say that, the nature of a pre-development loan is going to be a more risky activity for us at CBJ. Generally, I think we're looking at leveraging projects that are more shovel ready. Not to say that this isn't the type of thing that we're going to want to support. So just wanted to let you know that not ready for a recommendation quite yet, but hope to have one soon for you. So happy to take any questions on that.
Ms. Hale.
Thank you. Can somebody remind me of the location of this potential Gastineau Lodges? I think I know, but if you could remind me.
Thank you, through the chair. So this would be on Gastineau Avenue above downtown. The proposal, I think, is some 72 units. It's a large multi-family housing proposal.
So I knew that, but are we talking about like where the apartment that burned was, where it is relative to the other apartment building that was built about 10, 15 years ago?
Through the chair. So if my memory serves me right, the apartment that burned is immediately to the south of the proposed project. And I think we're looking at a couple tracts of vacant land on the downhill side of Gastineau Avenue.
Any more questions on that? So we'll get more information later.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would think that the next Finance Committee could be a good time for that, or it could be folded into the Lands Committee, but sometime,
okay.
Excuse me, soon.
Thank you. That brings us to item D, short-term rental registration ordinance. We asked for this to be drafted at the COW, and it has been drafted. So I guess we can we can ask questions, talk about what we want to see. I'm a little hesitant to try to make decisions given that we are missing 3 people who might also want to have a say. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Mr. Bryson, Mayor Weldon, Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While we've recognized the need to address this in the community, while I think working on this ordinance and getting some details out of the way now is probably fine, but I would strongly urge us to wait until after the Ironman competition this year before really diving in. I don't think that short-term rentals are as great as people might initially think. Oh, look at all this money we're going to make. But I think that there's, after the initial round of Ironman, that the amount of short-term rentals could be significantly less. And then do we have a temporary problem while we have Ironman coming into town, or do we have a long-term problem? I think waiting till after Ironman will give us a better understanding of what the community is really going to be like. Do people like this? Is it going to be a true problem that just continues to grow? Or do people really be like, oh my God, that wasn't as great as I thought? It's not awesome to bring a stranger into your personal home and let them use your stuff for a week. And so a little bit of patience on our part could save us maybe a whole lot of issues that are time that's not necessary. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Mayor Weldon.
Yeah, I get 2 questions because one of them is Mr. Bryson. Do you mean this year Ironman, or you're saying postpone it for 3 years?
No. I just meant, we talked about it in the fall after this Ironman this year, but to see what kind of problems.
Well, I would agree with Mr. Bryson. I think he's optimistic on how fast we would actually be. I think we could still talk about it. It would be well after Ironman that it gets thing. So my questions would be on page 13, section B, line 9, the for rent for fewer than 30 consecutive days. That gets rid of all the month-to-month rentals that we wouldn't really consider short-term rental, I'm assuming. Is that correct?
Do we need Mr. Palmer or Mr. Chambord? Did you? No, maybe.
Sure. So through the chair, so this definition is similar to the definition for short-term rental that's used in the tax abatement. So I think it's less than 30 consecutive days. So I don't think it conflicts with people doing monthly rents. But again, that would be a question for Mr. Palmer.
Do you want to ask Mr. Palmer? Should we make him show up?
I didn't know he was on, actually. I think I can accept Mr. Chambers. I just know that when we were first talking about short-term rentals, because we said 30 days, people were saying they were short-term rental because they were renting month to month, which to me, that's not a short-term rental. If you're renting to the same person, it's just month to month. So anyway, I think we can keep Mr. Palmer off.
Okay. Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Madam Mayor is correct that we probably won't move quite fast enough. I will say that while yes, it's okay to wait until after Ironman, what are we waiting for? Because we as an assembly or as a finance committee have not had good information about who is, what numbers of facilities or places are being changed. But what we have had is lots and lots of anecdotal information about, as Mandy Cole said at the last Lands, Housing and Economic Development meeting, about people, elderly people that are losing their apartment because it's being turned into a short-term rental. And so there's lots and lots of that kind of anecdotal information. And from Ms. Cole, actually a real desperation out there because a lot of lower income people are losing their homes right now. And so my concern is that we move on this expedition. I think we can move on this and still come in after Ironman has happened, but really trying to get a grip on what's going on in the community to help those people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hale. Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I may have sort of asked this at the last time we had this conversation, but you know, when we talked about this last time, there was a recommendation at the time to hire a consultant or a company that is kind of charged with monitoring and tracking this type of information. And I think we, you know, move forward with appropriating funds for that. But so I'm lacking clarity on kind of the difference between what that company could provide versus requiring registration.
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Treem. I think that's a good question. And I'll be just totally frank and say staff is having that exact same conversation during the day. What we think of those third-party services principally as reconnaissance. They're snooping, crawling the web, looking at rentals, trying to see how often those rentals are rented, what the approximate rates are. There's some work that most of those companies do on the back end to line up a rental listing with a parcel and potentially with an owner. So we do all of that on the reconnaissance side. And I think that it's a fair question. I think there is a thought that maybe we get to the same information by doing that we get through a registration program. Obviously, like any kind of government registration program, a registration program is the groundwork for you, the assembly, to choose to regulate them. You know, alternatively, if you or a future assembly chose to regulate short-term rentals, you would have to establish a registration program first. So in some ways, a registration program is the first step to some kind of regulation. And I don't think that's meant to feel onerous on anybody. It's just you, the assembly, I think, have expressed an interest in trying to understand more what the environment is like. I think you're correct. There are two ways to get there. One is via a web crawling kind of spy that gives us some information, and another through as a mandatory registration process. They will yield similar, but probably different results. We'll get slightly different information from both processes. So that's not a perfect answer to your question, but you know, staff are having that same conversation.
I have Mr. Bryson and then Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could just quickly answer Ms. Hale's concern, I was hoping for the most accurate information. So if somebody was an Airbnb leading up so that they could capture the Ironman, but then after that they didn't have any interest in that, then that's not, we don't want that information. And so that raised my other question about non-Airbnbs. I had heard that there were a few, I don't want to call it like athletic families where they had participated in some type of this competition, and they knew people, and they just, yeah, you can come stay at my house and pay me a couple bucks, whatever. So they didn't really do an Airbnb or a professional one. They just loaned their house out or just did the 1 week thing. And there've been a couple of those where they didn't create an Airbnb, they didn't turn their house into a business, but they maybe rented out a room or their house for the week of Ironman. Now that's a positive community thing. We'll open up my house to accommodate a large eventer in the community. So while we're trying to cover the Airbnbs and the VRBOs and the people that are turning this into a business, we want to collect the appropriate revenue and taxes and bed taxes. The mom and pop that are just opening their house up for a week to cover Ironman or something along that lines, if we could, that's what I'm trying to like help us separate. We don't need to have a big, if you rent one bed for one night, man, you better have it on a registration. Or if you're the kind of family that says, yeah, we'll let another family use our house during Ironman. I think that if we, like we're trying too hard to capture every single thing. And I think that that might dissuade a family that would open up their house. We don't want to make it over-regulated. But I get it. The people that are turning this into business, treat them like a business. But the people that are just doing this for onesies or twosies, to ease up the summer, can we? I don't know where I'm trying to go with that question.
Can I try to ask?
Please,
Because I had that on my list too. I was wondering when I talked to Mr. Palmer earlier today about we have a definition of short-term rental, and I was wondering if we could add something in there about a cumulative number of days in a year that would count. So if you're only renting your house out for the Ironman, we don't care. But he said that, you know, those are technically still required to pay sales tax and hotel bed tax. So this is my ask, which I think might be a big one for finance and law. Can we, in both places, exempt those kinds of informal one-off rentals? I think, is that kind of what you're getting at? Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Chair Treem. Mr. Palmer may want to weigh in on this too. As we had a conversation in a recent meeting, there is a section of the sales tax code for casual and isolated sales. Casual and isolated sales under almost all circumstances means garage sales and you selling a sofa to your neighbor, meaning that it's not part of a business. There's no business advertisement of it. That's what we think of as a casual and isolated sale. The hotel bed tax section of code at CBJ is totally separate and has no such similar provision. So we have generally, as you know, really we've faced this circumstance with the Ironman because people have been motivated to rent out their own home for a week. And we have simply had to apply the code, which doesn't have any kind of exemption for that kind of engagement. We have forced people who are renting out their homes to comply with the code, meaning obtain a business license, register for hotel bed tax and sales tax. Assemblymember Bryson mentioned a circumstance where I knew a family and agreed for them to either rent my house or stay in my house for a nominal price. I mean, chances are we're just never going to know about that. I mean, it doesn't necessarily make it lawful, but in the absence of using an advertising platform like Airbnb or Craigslist or something, we have no idea that money just changes hands between two friends. And in some conceptual way, that kind of fits in that casual and isolated sale category. But there is no provision to exempt that from hotel bed tax in CBJ's code today. So if somebody calls the sales tax office and says, I'm doing this, we would say you need a business license and you need to file sales tax and hotel bed tax. I think what you're talking about in principle is something that Mr. Palmer and I can work on if it is the Assembly's desire to create another exemption, both in the sales tax code and in the hotel bed tax code for rentals of short duration.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. I have Mayor Weldon, Ms. Hale, and then back to Mr. Bryson. Okay.
I'm interested in that too, and why we're all focused on Ironman. The other big celebration that we have is Celebration that hits us, and so I'd be interested in a one-off. So I was gonna, this isn't my question, I still get to ask my question, but I was gonna throw Mr. Bryson under the bus and tell him to work with law departments, see if he'd come up with some language. Anyway, my question actually is more of a statement. I don't need an answer to it. I'm looking at page 14 of 17, lines 10 and 11. I think we need a definition of a unit because it says the line 10 says the physical address of the unit to be used as a short-term rental, which sounds okay. I know what that probably is, but then you go to a brief description of the short-term rental facility. So is the unit the whole facility or is the unit one part of that facility? So I would ask Mr. Palmer to make that a little more clearer in the ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. Mr. Watt.
Thank you, Chair. And if the Finance Committee could indulge me for just a minute, I just feel really compelled to ask you to think about creating another exemption in the tax code. And it's I often rib Mr. Rogers on how enforcement of our uniform sales tax code is going. Because it's not. We have a lot of exemptions in there and they are hard to manage. They take a lot of staff work. So I would just ask the assembly to be open to the idea that maybe this is a sleeping dog and that maybe another exemption is not the best way to deal with this. So just a few thoughts.
I take your point, although I was told that if we wanted to make the registration not apply to everybody, we should also address the tax code, but we can all think about that. Ms. Hale.
Mr. Watt just stopped my brain, so I think I don't have anything to say.
Okay, I have a, oh, not really a question. On Ms. Wall's point about would this be kind of redundant with some of the services, I guess as you guys are researching that, one of the pieces of information that I am most interested, if not the piece of information I'm most interested in collecting, is what type of dwelling unit is being used as an Airbnb. Is it an entire house? Is it a mother-in-law apartment? Is it an apartment in an apartment building? And maybe that's information that could be collected by one of these services, but if it's not, I'd feel pretty strongly about moving forward with our own registration process. So put that on the list of things to look up. More questions on this one? No? What should we do with it? I guess.
Allow me a chance to work with legal, and I'll try to get something that's like makes sense and is trying to accomplish the one-off, so that way we can keep the one-offs off of it and then but still accomplish the things that we've been talking to. I'll bring it back to finance when I have a chance with Mr. Palmer.
Ms. Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. I was going to thank the mayor, Madam Mayor, and you for your comments. But as you're working with legal, I think it might be important to be attentive to what Mr. Watt just said, which is this assembly often tends to noodle real deep into things, and we do create a lot of work for staff. So maybe work with legal, but also consult with Mr. Watt if you would, just so that we don't get too in the weeds creating complexities. Thank you, sir.
No weeds, Ms. Hale.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Wall, did I see your hand?
It was a half hand. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just because we were having the conversation about what's finance and what's not, I don't really necessarily care where this goes next, but I do think it should be the whole body. And so if it's not finance, Cal would be great. I don't really care which.
Maybe we can make that decision depending on scheduling and where it will fit best. But yeah, I agree. It could also be a cow topic. Okay, well, we'll leave this either in this committee or in the cow, but somewhere where we're all talking about it. That brings us to our last item, info only permitting fees memorandum, which was a little confusing. So who is going to take this one? Mr. Watt.
Thank you, Chair. So I think there have been several discussions where people had been speculating on the cost of permitting fees. And so we just asked our administrative officer to give some examples so you could see real life costs of permitting. In example one, there's a line missing in the printed paper packet. So in example one, that one required a conditional use permit. And so there's a conditional use permit fee of $400. You add that line in, then the math works out. But we just, there had been several discussions with the assembly, and seemed like people were unclear on the cost of permitting. So just a few examples on accessory apartments, what a permittee might pay for their fees.
Any questions, Ms. Hale?
Thank you. I too was confused by this. And I think I brought up when we were talking about requiring people that got the $6,000 for an accessory apartment, saying that they couldn't use that for a short-term rental. And I think I was surmising that would about pay for building permit fees. And I'm just looking at the last example. I mean, for example, I've thought, wow, we could add a tiny house. And then I'm thinking, oh yeah, so there would go that $6,000 because that would burn that all up. And I'm looking at example 3 and, you know, doing something like that probably would burn the $6,000 up. So that's just interesting information. Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me of that context. It makes a lot more sense now. Mayor Weldon.
Thank you for reminding me of that context too, because I agree it makes a lot more sense. But notice in example 3, that's including your house permit. It's not just the accessory apartment.
Oh, okay. Is that the case? So those permit fees are covering all of.
That's correct, Chair. And then also remember, when you get a building permit, you don't have to pay sales tax on your building materials. And is it just building materials? You know?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a significant benefit to having a building permit.
So a single family house with a accessory apartment, the building permit's 3,000. I mean, I added a solarium and my building permit was like 1,000. So.
Mr. Watt.
So building permits generally based on valuation, you know, how much, if you're going to build something, you know, how much is it going to be worth or cost? And you go down the table. So a whole house with an apartment is going to be a lot higher value. And it's going to get you further down that table to a bigger number. Whereas say converting the garage, you know, maybe you're doing a $50,000 or $100,000 remodel, you're going to pay less. That's how the building permit fees are calculated.
You learn something new every day. Mr. Bryson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So paying for CDD, what is the difference between the fees that are collected and the assembly funding? So when we create the budget, create CDD budget, how much of CDD's budget is the fees that they collect to pay for their activities versus assembly general funds? Or is it split up that way even?
Mr. Watt.
Chair, I don't know off the top of my head. So there is actually 2 departments in here. Building permit fees are going to be a revenue source for the community development department. But most of the department's funding is going to be general fund. So it's going to be a relatively small portion. The utility permits also helped fund the part of the engineering department that manages connections and inspections on the water and sewer. And that's kind of the long-standing utility permits have been like that since the 80s. And but we can actually give you real answers on the allocation of the department's funding.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Chambler.
And through the chair, and just to be clear on the funding for the accessory apartments, there's a line item of $96,000 from the Affordable Housing Fund that's been there for the last 5 years. And then an earlier look at the cost of accessory apartments. So you have the permitting details here, but on average, the cost to construct an accessory apartment of any of these types is between $40,000 and $60,000. So the accessory apartment grant is really a small portion of the overall costs, whether it's going towards permitting, construction materials, or new furnishings. They're kind of free to spend it where they want.
Mr. Watt.
Chair, my compatriots here have done some quick research, and one of them has provided me with a pie chart and the other with a spreadsheet from the budget book.
Wow.
So for community development, about 83% of the department's funding is general fund.
General. Is the balance from just this or from other sources as well?
Largely charges for services.
Okay, that was fast. Thank you, guys. Any other questions, comments on this memo? Yes, Mayor Weldon. Anything else to come before the Finance Committee? No, I don't think so. Our next meeting is August 3rd. We are adjourned. Thank you.